Hi everyone. Obviously, Thursdays are not the day for hosting webinars by the looks of things. Let's give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Otherwise, it's going to be a very personalized session for each of you on the call already.
Hey, Georgina,
Hello.
I sent the invite round to a bunch of people in my team, and when they went to register, it actually came up as tomorrow.
Oh,
And so
okay.
the invite was showing in for Friday, the 27th. So I don't know, but then I
Okay.
can see Pauline and Anne have managed to join. So it looks like
Okay.
it's worked out for us.
Okay, no problems. I'll make sure that the recording's forwarded as well. So feel free to pass it around and I'll redo it again sometime during the year as well. But yeah, it's recorded, so feel free to share.
Nice one, thanks.
That's all right. Hi, Pauline. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yes. All right, a few more people and then we'll get started. How is everybody's Thursday going anyway? Good so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. You look like you were contemplating it there, Molly.
I keep thinking about Friday.
Yeah, true, right? Everyone's thinking about Friday at this stage, right? And it's the last week in February, which is
Yeah.
also a little bit difficult, right? And end of month reporting and everything.
Yeah.
Awesome. There's Anne. Hi, Anne.
Hi, how are
Cool.
you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Let's do
I just
it.
sent the link to our other team member, so he should be along shortly as well.
Okay, no problems. Feel free to share. I was just saying earlier as well, I'll record the call. It's automatically recording anyway. So I'll send out the link to it afterwards and feel free to share it. There's nothing that's proprietary about what I'm about to share. So yeah, feel free. Cool. I think that's probably, yeah, what time is it? 12:01. Yeah, okay. I'll go to share screen and then as more people jump in, I'll do that. So let's do that one. Cool, bananas. We were just talking about how everyone's week is going. If it's going okay, let me just go to that. Go to presenter mode, and then I will minimize that screen and bring up Teams. Cool, let's bring this one over here so I can see your faces. Admit. Cool, I think. Nathan, okay. Nice Paul. Alrighty, I think we'll get started. The aim of today was obviously to run through some tips and tricks around creating an effective health and safety strategy. As you probably saw from my LinkedIn posts, I said I'm not an expert. I have contributed to, help develop, seeing them across a number of high-risk industries, and know this time of year is really prevalent with companies and organizations bringing their teams together. I've been asked to present at a number of them, so I thought it's quite topical right now, perhaps to give some tips and tricks, particularly aligned with a more modern way of thinking about the way we do safety and building our safety strategies as well. So you'll certainly see some themes that are current across the way that I work in general coming through this presentation, but it doesn't mean that you have to be of any particular camp doing any particular type of safety to get any value from this. You should hopefully be able to get some tips and tricks. For those of you who I have not met before, I'm Georgina Poole, so I'm the co-founder and director of Event Learning Australia, basically a health and safety consultancy business that helps organisations globally. Last year, 4 countries around the globe I travelled to. This year, it's looking around 3, which is great so far. So helping organisations in a variety of different ways, from strategies like what you're about to see all the way through to physical, embedded discovery on the ground, listening to the front line and providing those insights back to senior level leadership, board level presentations, assistance with developing systems and processes, a whole heap of fun stuff. And as part of that, my previous career prior to starting the consulting business was basically working for the last 17 years across mining, oil and gas, and construction, embedded as a safety professional. The last kind of embedded role I had was as the senior safety manager for Coca-Cola here in Australia. And it was a fantastic role, but towards the end of my 12-month stint with Coca-Cola, my son received a diagnosis for ADHD and autism, and I'm still dealing with some of the ramifications of those even as we speak this week. I've had 2 calls to pick him up nice and early from school. So that meant I could no longer commit to a full-time role. And so started the business as a way to be more flexible with my time, and then started studying my PhD under Professor Decker at Griffith University, where I'm still currently enrolled. So doing all of that and wanting to share with community, wanting to share with industry, wanting to give back, I guess, is what I'm all about. So for those of you that dialed into the session kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to walk away with like a fully developed strategy. Unfortunately, that's not what this is. I'm not going to be telling you what needs to go into your strategy. More, I'm going to give you some guidance around how to create a strategy and some patterns that I've seen work across multiple organizations. I'll also give you some questions and methods to hopefully improve your thinking around what needs to go into a health and safety strategy, what doesn't. And then I guess a newer way of looking at things. 20 years ago when I first started out in safety, what we used to do on the mine site was literally bring the whole entire safety team together. We'd chat amongst ourselves what we thought the problems were within the organisation, and then we'd literally brainstorm, put some ideas on a bit of paper, and voila. If we did that. In some instances where I worked, the health and safety manager or the director or whoever was the highest level in safety in the business would actually create the strategy and then kind of like ask the team, what would you like to do as part of this? So that was, what used to happen. So what we're going to be looking at is a way that you can actually bring operational leaders as well as safety professionals together productively to help develop the strategy. So this isn't going to be a one size fits all. That's not what this is about. I'm not going to tell you the things that definitely should be included, whilst we will talk about those questions that should hopefully get you thinking about what those are. This isn't what I'm not going to give you plans from BHP or any of the organisations I've worked at, and this isn't a lecture on how to comply with legislation. So if you're here for the left, you're in the right place. If you're here for the right, then I'm afraid you're not going to get very much from this in the first instance. So some of the common patterns that I've kind of seen, as you heard me say, were around seeing health and safety strategies as like this safety activity plan. Let's jot down all the programs and interventions that we're going to launch either in the next 1, 3, 5, whatever time frame that's going to be. Lots of time. Lots and lots of time being spent on, making sure we have the right words, making sure it looks great, posters and colourful sticker notes, but not actually enough time being spent on recognising what those real operational issues are within the business. As you heard me say, I've seen the safety team drafting the health and safety strategy and then trying to sell it to those operational leaders who we need to give us buy-in when we create these programs or bodies of work. I've seen senior leaders then, give it the tick of approval, but they don't actually use it to steer any of the decisions that are being made within their departments either. The other thing here is the metrics. Once you've identified, what are you working on? Usually we put metrics in place, but they're very much focused on completion and those assurance activities, training, etc. And we'll talk about some flips or some different ones that you could potentially use to track some of those, but not really identifying, has anything actually changed from the strategy we put in place 12 months, 3 months, whatever time period before. And then, these programs get launched, the safety strategy gets put up on a wall in a beautiful A3 poster, or sometimes even bigger. On mine sites, it used to be like 2 meters by 2 meters. And it was, whiteboard, and we could have colorful pens, and it was this beautiful thing. But there was never a review rhythm that was built into it to come back at predetermined intervals to ensure that we were on track, we were meeting them. There was always meetings that were held from a performance perspective with my direct managers around, Georgina, how are you tracking to these particular elements of the safety strategy? But never overall reviews geared towards, are we on track? How do we feel? Do we need to change things up from the overall safety strategy? So they were some of the common patterns that really kind of left me thinking that, there has to be something better that can be done. So when I was thinking about really kind of moving forward, what makes a great strategy, or how do you develop, what that looks like, it really is about not starting with initiatives. And I know that's really, really hard not to do. We get really caught up in making sure that we've got all of these, brilliant initiatives, or, last year something flagged with some manager or director or executive, and it's a problem and it has to be fixed. And it's sat as this hot topic that, we now need to have an initiative. We need to roll out a new PPE process. We need to put out a glove policy, whatever that looks like. The idea that I have seen really work globally is to start with the challenges that the strategy has to solve. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. But the idea is to actually have the strategy be that very, very starting focal point for better conversations and for better decisions. And those decisions are actions that continuously happen. So what I'm used to seeing is this strategy as this beautiful, 38-page document, or on MindSights, this massive thing that sits on a wall that we're all held accountable to. But there's no decisions that are constantly being, reviewed, and there's no follow through on those decisions on a constant basis as well. So for those of you that have been to one of my sessions before, you should know they're usually interactive regardless of what information I'm giving you. So right now what I'd like is, in the chat box, could you please fill in the following for me? So in my organization, safety strategy normally becomes, and then, insert words here. What does it normally become in your organization? Is it a document? Is it just a thing? Is it a measurement? Is it something the managers harp over every, day at a meeting? What does that look like? What does a safety strategy, look like in your organization? I see Paula's typing there. I'm going to scroll down. Feel free to take yourself off mute as well if you just want to call it out. I'm okay with that. Cool. So in my organization, safety strategy normally becomes a single measurement with a focus on completion. Yep, that's pretty typical. A document for the board. Yes, most definitely. That's right. So those safety strategies where they're a single measurement, obviously that's very tunnel vision. You've honed in on, one particular thing, and we kind of, go at it no matter what, like a dog almost chasing a bone. Pauline says clarity on what we're focusing on. Measurements for completion as well. So again, we have those themes of we're tracking to completion, but that's it, right? Just the completion. It's not about the quality of the interventions or the things that we're putting in place, or what is it actually changing within the organization. It's more, here's the box, we've got a task or we've got an initiative, is it done? And what I'm used to seeing is definitely, racy charts or charts around progression. We used to have to color in boxes even with how far, it was 100%, this big long bar graph, and you'd have to color in how much of the initiative you were up to. So those kinds of things obviously are very driven towards, here's an activity, let's get it done. It's assigned to you for whatever reason. And we'll talk about how do we get assigned actions when we're building a health and safety strategy. And then that's it. You just basically head forward. You might have a measurement for it. Paul says, in my organization, we have a HSEQ activation plan that supports the overall company strategy, provides focus. So Paul, the overall company strategy, I take it, has multiple elements from various areas. And then your activation plan is the safety related content, I presume. Is that correct? Yeah, cool bananas. Okay, that's great. So yeah, obviously being much larger organizations might have that. So the activation plan would, talk about what levers are we going to pull to achieve these particular company strategy points. It'll be interesting to see from a metrics perspective whether some of the metrics that I'll mention towards the end of this presentation are still part of company strategy, and how do we get to move those around. So we'll talk about that in a second actually, and see how we align in that. So when we're building a strategy at the end of the day, most of us really focus on what we see here. What are the measurements? What activities need to be done, and then how do we track to that completion? We hardly ever kind of ask these three questions. Or we're like, oh, last year we had, a manager or a work area say these were our issues, and so that's, what we're going to be focusing on. Or look, our investigational process is out of date, so we're going to update it this year. I would rather propose that instead of just going ahead with the standard stuff that we can kind of see in the chat box, that we focus our attention around these 3 questions. And I've definitely seen in Europe, the States, not so much in Australia, but the change in the health and safety strategy to be more focused on these 3 questions. So first one there is, where are we most exposed? And that's definitely around our critical risk, our things that, kill our people. Don't get me wrong, obviously every safety strategy is going to have some element of those little things that need to capture. But at the end of the day, that very first focus there should be on where are we most exposed? The next question there is, where is work hardest to do well? Where are we making it more difficult for our people to actually do their jobs? Where are things overcluttered? Where are things where it's very compliance driven when it doesn't need to be? So asking where is work hardest to do well might provide you with some weak signals that would be really great to incorporate into your safety strategy. And then the last one there is kind of alluding to also where are we most exposed, around where do leaders have the least visibility. To understand the answers to each of those 3 questions, though, means you need to be a forward-thinking organisation that actually values your people, you trust their insights, and you even have a process in place, whether it be leadership interactions, safety conversations, the 4Ds, whatever it looks like. You have something in place that you go to the front line regularly, learning teams even, and you ask your front line, what do we make you do that's really difficult? How could we make your job easier? What are those things that we might be missing? You give me, your views and your insights. So the idea is through those insights, you would understand where do those leaders have the least visibility. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it is those areas that create some of the areas where you're going to be most exposed as well. So you might find you have multiple things. So does anyone want to share either some of the challenges or answers to those questions from within their organisations? Like, where do you think you're most exposed, or where do you think work is hardest to do well within your organisation, or where do leaders have the least visibility? Anyone want to share? We all gone quiet. Hey, Leah, thanks for joining. So nobody wants to share where their leaders might have the least visibility or where it's hardest to do work. Thanks, Caitlin. So for us, it would be task training. Can you clarify what you mean by task training, or what kind of environment that task training would be in?
So I'm in agriculture, so it's that especially feedlotting. So it's making sure people know how to do the tasks they need to do, not just operate the machines. So
and so what would be
nuance?
What would be some of the challenges though with ensuring that task training is conducted?
It's having good. I don't love documentation, but actually knowing what we're training them in, and then also making that accessible, covering off language other than English and low literacy and everything to make sure we get the understanding. So it's that, to me, is where we're most exposed, because we aren't quite hitting the mark there and ticking all those boxes.
Yeah, perfect. And is task training currently covered from understanding those particular challenges in your health and safety strategy as it sits?
As it sits right now, yes, it is a key focus. But again, one of our biggest challenges is resourcing at the moment.
Okay, that's great. So we'll talk about when we have underlying challenges to some of the things included in our health and safety strategy. What does that mean? Paul, I'll just give me a second. I'll grab you. So I've got Paula saying she feels most exposed in contractor management, both overreach and underreach. Paul, do you want to just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, it sort of feels like because we're the client and the risks aren't ours, often we're sort of either diving too far into what's not actually our business and we had nothing to do with, or we're sort of like, it's not our business, and there's not that even balance where there's
altogether, right?
Yeah, and it's like that balance of what should people expect from us versus what did we actually contribute to this incident when we've hired somebody to do a job. And it's our sort of, our planning and our making sure they've got enough time to do the job and paying them sufficiently and setting it up right, and then something will go wrong and we're like,
Yep.
getting our fingers
Okay.
involved when we maybe shouldn't.
Okay, and is contractor management specifically those areas around, pay, around, those issues? Is that part of your health and safety strategy right now?
Yeah.
Good
So
stuff.
it's being refreshed
Refreshed.
about
Okay.
by our
Excellent.
group manager. So it's definitely in there, which is good.
Okay, that's great. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're
I'll
good.
speak so I won't type because my fingers aren't that quick.
No, you're all good.
We have staff working in project offices on major infrastructure
Yep.
projects. They could be there for 3 to 5 years working with other clients, contractors and partners. So they sometimes tend to lose their identity to their parent organisation because they're wearing
Yeah.
different Alliance t-shirts and collateral, different emails as well. So it's something we're trying to encourage about leaders going out, making them be part of, still feel like
Yeah.
they're part of the company, coming back into the main offices. But yeah, that's a part of the business that worries me a little bit because they sort of
Yeah.
lose that identity.
Yeah, so that connectedness back with their actual employer, right, when they're absorbed into and even, integrated into systems and processes on sites and teams, etc. What is that labeled as in the, safety strategy that you have in your organization? Is it in there?
It's labelled as a growth area, so it's a growing problem.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Right. Okay, that's great. So you can see there's some common themes. Most of you are saying, you have these things within your safety strategy. When you were building those safety strategies or contributing to them, did these 3 questions pop up? Did any of these contribute to what needs to go into those safety strategies? Or does anyone want to share how the safety strategy kind of came together within their organization? No, we've got a no from Caitlin. What, do we see value in those 3 questions, or do we think we're, riding a high horse and perhaps why would we care about where work is hardest to do well or where our leaders have the least amount of visibility? What's our thoughts around?
I think they are wonderful questions, and I will definitely be using them in our March strategy session to reframe and review.
Okay.
I suppose for us, we went through a very different strategy process last year, which is a first for the business. And it was a really good opportunity because we had leadership in the room and operational managers in the room at the same time. So it was good, but it was difficult to work through, well, where are we needing to focus in safety? So these questions, I think, will help frame that and pose those questions better.
Yep, no, that's good. And we'll talk about reframing it. When we're kind of trying to build a real picture of what should we be looking at, it's really easy to get overwhelmed depending on how many people you have in the room and what those issues are. And everyone has their own agenda, even with the best intentions. The quality team will want to raise their things. If you're, doing a collaborative process, you've got a number of operational departments in, they'll always have their own biases and things that want to come out. When you kind of think about what does that real picture look like, that serious risk exposure is very important. So are any repeat themes. If you've had any quality escapes, any disruptions, or any incidents that kind of stand out that have highlighted some really big system, process issues, then those things should definitely help shape, here's what we're going to be pulling together. From an assurance finding, when you look back at your audit results, when you look back at those inspections and that, documented paper safe kind of objectives, what's not sticking? So what are those things that we might be letting go by the wayside, or those areas on those inspections and those assurance activities that are highlighting as consistently, not being checked or failing in audit or whatever that might look like. The other thing there is the supervisor reality, those pressure points. It's all well and good sometimes to invite those operational leaders to contribute to conversations, but we hardly ever dig a little bit deeper and ask them to tell us what those pressure points are. On a day-to-day basis, what are the things that are keeping you up? When you go home to your wife or your partner, friend, dog, etc., and you say you've had a really cruddy day, what are those things that are those pressure points that are causing you pain throughout the shift? And then the other element to that is it's not just about our leadership teams, but what is it that's causing friction for our frontline teams? where have we noticed there's workarounds, whether it be physical safety, operational safety, psychosocial risk, like where is it that people are having to make do or invent, create, bring in something to keep the job going and keep it successfully? And then also, what are the constraints? Is it finance? Is it resources? Is it literally we have a document management system with 700 documents and nobody's reviewing it? What does that look like? So those 5 things there should help you shape the real picture, and that then in turn help shape, well, what are those activities and things that we need to focus on moving forward? So which of these 5 that you can kind of see is least used in your current strategy process, and why do you think that's the case? So Paul's got 1 and 2, but not enough on 3. That's great. Good job. Anybody else kind of, is there any of those that you're leaning towards where they're definitely counted? I've seen a lot to do with assurance findings, actually, not so much around what's not holding, but if a particular audit on multiple sites, highlights, say, hazardous chemicals. I've definitely been in organisations where they've gone, well, hazardous chemicals needs to be part of our safety strategy for next year. Let's work on what an intervention program or a body of work might look like in that particular area. Repeat themes, cool. So repeat themes around events and disruptions. Caitlin, what kind of questioning happens around, when you've had multiple events or disruptions from a quality production type perspective in the organisation?
It's typically with those operational managers and supervisors.
That's great.
Going higher than that, they don't really ask those questions, which is
okay.
Again, an opportunity.
Yep.
So, but we do, that's when we can start to really dig down and go, well, how can we do this differently, or what do we need to focus on? And normally that's outside of the strategy process. That is more that day-to-day supporting them to improve process.
Yeah. So on the call, we've got roughly 13, must be 12 people, 13 with myself. Does anyone include those frontline frictions or workarounds or constraints as part of health and safety strategy usually? Or has anyone had it be a part of their safety strategy within their organisation? No. Paul, I was going to say, yeah, you work for a pretty big organisation. Leah does. Awesome. Do you, Paul, include it in some shape, way, or form?
We did. We had a series of what we call listening forums, different time sets, different groups, different themes, and using various interactive tools to people provide, using word clouds and feedback. People don't often like to speak up in public forums, but using technology, that worked well to give us a picture of that. But we do regular field visits. We're trying to get that on a regular basis as well. And now we use Copilot to look at all that data to give us themes and strategies in relation to it.
Yeah, that's great. And good to hear the use of AI to make things easier and less strenuous for the team, right?
Always need to verify the output.
Of course. AI slop and hallucinations is something that it does on a day-to-day basis. The last one I saw yesterday, my husband used it for something and it had sentiment. It was like, I cannot give you the test answers. And we were like, since when did ChatGPT get, morals all of a sudden? It's interesting. So great to see some of the effectiveness around including. If you don't currently include the frontline friction, my statement here would be, like everything else, sometimes, not all the time in every single organisation, but if you're not including that frontline friction as part of your health and safety strategy, when you go to send it out to the greater teams, the greater parts of the organisation, it may come across again like the safety team have got together, have developed a strategy, maybe if you were lucky, you had some operational leaders who, shared their bits and pieces with you, but we've missed that really critical element of talking to our people who are at the pointy end of the stick doing the work. So I would ask, try and get those mechanisms out there to listen in, to recognize where those workarounds and those constraints are for your frontline personnel, and then try and build it back into those health and safety strategies. What the idea would be is usually, people get together, we develop a health and safety strategy, and sometimes, not all the time, we don't theme them up, or we come up with 75, 80 different actions, sometimes more, sometimes less, based on the health and safety strategy, and then people have to grab it and own it and run with it. So if you can, in the chat now, is there any recurring themes that you have seen kind of coming up within your organizations that you would think could, should, would, whatever counterfactual you would like to use, be a part of your health and safety strategy? So things that have come across in the last 6 to 12 months, they could be operational issues, things that are out there that you might be missing at the moment. So Paula, you're saying you are covering off everything that is currently an issue or an exposure in your health and safety strategy right now. There are no known issues that we're missing. So Paul saying the usability of the management system is one that's coming through. That's great. I've heard lots of people saying they're on the market for a new safety management system. It's the beginning of the year, or it's a 2 or 3 year project. And that always causes a little bit of headaches when you're going to market or trying to work out how to get that working. Oh, okay. No worries, Paul. Cool. So in your organization, do you have any kind of issues that continuously are popping up, or that you've heard from the frontline or you've heard from leadership? I can see Anne is typing. Is there some current themes you can think of, Anne, within your organization?
Oh no, I was just going to say ditto to the management system that Paul
Yeah.
said under his previous for another question, but I would say
hot
ditto.
topic. Yeah, it's a hot topic, right? Like, yeah, I was at a meeting with my son's school yesterday, and we were talking about, could you get us like some data? And they're like, oh, we use Engage, and I'm like, I know exactly what that is. I said, they're like, oh, it's constrained by boxes. We're looking for something else. I'm like, yeah, you and every other organization as well, right? And we all know that there is no system that fits us, perfectly, but there are definitely providers on the market who will customize for you and build modules and things around what you want. So I guess that's, like part of the issue in itself. Olivia, you're typing as well. So we've got the usability of the management system and a few of us agreeing that we're on the market. What do you think from a serious exposure? Oh, low incident reporting from our contractors. Do you want to expand on that, Olivia, around what you mean? And yeah.
We have, close to 2,000 courier contractors. So they are exposed to a number of critical risks every day, but we have very, very low incident and near miss, including near miss reporting from them. And it's probably linked to system usability.
Yeah. Okay. Your system or theirs?
They report into our system. Yeah, it's not particularly user-friendly if you're an external participant to the system.
Okay.
But we're heavily reliant on our data and our incident database to kind of tell us about our risk exposure. And you have a large proportion of our workforce not using the system effectively. Potentially, we're not fully realizing, the extent of our exposure.
Yeah, so the data's potentially skewed, right? Like you're missing out on a whole heap of data that could be shaping some decisions, and instead we're basing it off what we're seeing, which could be the tiny little bit of the iceberg.
Yeah, and it's also a good mechanism for sort of consultation and coordination with 100%. Our supply chain, but if it's not working effectively, then it builds kind of resentment from them. They see all these problems, but they can't report them, then we can't fix them, and it's just a, bad cycle.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's definitely frustrating. The other thing, how you said you think it's based on the usability. Have you done any digging or learning from a plethora of contractors to really understand why that is?
No, we haven't. And I guess, this is kind of an interesting reality, I think, of setting a strategy, because we would love to put on there that we could do some kind of discovery for a new platform. We engage with everybody to understand where the pain points are, etc. But then if the business can't accommodate that initiative in the next year's, in the next 12 months, then there's almost no point us putting on our strategy.
Yeah, I don't know that I would go as far as listing it on their strategy. More just I would look at what listening mechanisms do we have in place for our contractors, not just in regards to incidents, but across the board. What forums do we have for them to share their insights, their issues, their challenges with, your organization?
Yeah.
And then, and then how do we incorporate that? And if you've got a chunk of, contractors that are all saying the same thing, then that's something you might want to include on the strategy as opposed to a specific issue around usability of, the system.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I can see your brain is working. No, that's cool. Not so much the minor stuff. And then I see, again, Caitlin, you've put a really big issue up there around traffic management, which is it's a massive thing, and ensuring it's well considered during those facility upgrades and I guess any change that occurs. Is there anything particular about the traffic management? Is it updating documents? Is it, understanding the risks associated with the changes, or?
Yeah, it's multifaceted, but mostly it's that actual operational risk. So when we're looking at a facility upgrade and we're going, okay, well, our best solution is to have a secondary access road. We're going to separate light and heavy vehicle, but this is going to cost X number of dollars. And hang on, that's a lot of money. The risks aren't being fully understood, I don't think, because then you start to add in, what's the increase in vehicle movements in high traffic areas already, and the pressure on all the other areas of the site, it starts to snowball, and you can see why that's needed. And then it's trying to obviously sell that and aid in that understanding. So for me, it's that broader strategy of that importance of understanding that operational risk when it comes to traffic management and how we manage our movements.
Yeah, definitely. And if it's been flagged, in a number of different areas as well, then I'd say definitely highlight it as a business-wide thing that needs to be addressed in a safety strategy. If it's one particular area, similar to my comments around, Olivia, it'd be more, what mechanisms do we have in place to identify when those things come up? And then cost at the end of the day is such a huge factor in everything these days. So it does help to do the exercise of what are those themes, like what are we hearing from our people? And instead of going, we need to address every single one, what are those things, like we talked about our system? What can we do in regards to our system? What can we do in regards to traffic management as a whole, and think more high level as opposed to usability? Like what are those improvements that we can do? But constantly in the back of our minds thinking about what are those listening mechanisms that we have in place to hear when those weak signals are coming up? Because what we're looking for, and I guess, the word better is in inverted commas, it's not better, it's just different, is if you can theme things up. And for those of you that have seen me present on learning teams or actions from incident investigations, the idea is we usually come up with a whole heap of things. And I've definitely walked away from a health and safety strategy meeting with like 35 actions. It's a huge spreadsheet we're sending out to people. The idea is you want quality, not quantity, and you want things to be meaningfully different in 4 different areas in decisions that are getting made and getting made constantly. It's not, no, we don't have money. It's, look, we're going to put a CapEx in. It's going to take 5 years, but we're going to get there eventually. Then in also the execution of those bodies of work and things that are being included, as well as escalation. If things don't go to plan, if we do need to pull in extra resources, if we need assistance in getting buy-in and engagement, what does that look like? And then if we're constantly having repeat surprises, then we should know that something's happening and we're a little off track. So if you looked at, and we've had some really juicy kind of topics in the chat field there, if you looked at, say traffic management as a really key exposure there, if this improved, what kinds of things would you see in Caitlin's organisation if we did improve, the decisions, the execution, the escalation, and those repeat surprises? What would we see happen within Caitlin's organisation? So if we're making better decisions, we're actually executing things properly, we've got the support, the escalation processes in place, and those repeat surprises are not necessarily there, how would we know that we've made an impact? What does that look like?
I think if I look at it, it would be a lot less near miss incidents, a lot less of those, yeah, because we do get a few of them. We've got heavy vehicles, we've got forklifts, we've got light vehicles, we've got buggies, we've got everything going everywhere. So, you know, and then there's pedestrians, but less near misses, less reliance on having to utilize technology to prevent those near misses and incidents as well. So we've got a bit of technology floating around the site as well to help operators identify hazards while they're operating as well.
Yep. That's perfect. Thanks, Caitlin. And what about from Olivia from the low incident reporting? You know, like if we were making constant decisions and executing, you know, different strategies and different actions, and then making sure that we had escalation. So, you know, if things happened at a contractor, there was a process that picked up on as a backup, I guess, plan to reporting, and you know, whether it's using the same system, whatever that looks like, what kinds of things could we see, or we would know it's improving because of what? How would we know?
I think one of the obvious things would be we have a lot of what we call our PCBU forums where we meet up with our contractors and talk to them about different things. And at the moment, there are some themes they're constantly raising. You know, you haven't fixed the potholes and, you know, this isn't working. And if we had a really strong, or we'd improved our incident reporting and then the follow-up to that, then I would suspect those repeat kind of issues wouldn't be there. Yeah. Hopefully.
So, or they'd be happy and they'd be saying, we love our new safety management system. Perhaps. I've never heard anyone say we love our safety management system, but maybe somewhere someone, and obviously we think if we improve some of those things, so the effectiveness of our driver safety zones, our traffic management, the incident reporting, it would definitely feel different for those operators on the ground, right? And I think that's the key question. It's all well and good to change a strategy, to implement something, to, you know, put an extra body of work in for the safety team and the managers, et cetera, to go and implement. But if what we're implementing doesn't impact, to use Dave Proven's words, the safety of work, as in the front line, the increase of reporting, the, you know, traffic management incidents decreasing, you know, like if you can put that as a goal, you know, whatever those things are, the actual safety of work, as opposed to, you know, great, I ran a really beautiful program and now everyone thinks, you know, like whatever the safety management system is perfect. I think we sometimes miss the mark when it comes to that. So at the end of the day, what we're looking for from did we hit the mark is not what we're used to, completion of projects, completion of intervention or body of work. It's have we actually changed and impacted the safety of work on the front line by those people who do those tasks every single day, who have to report on incidents. Because when we're thinking about who keeps a safety strategy alive, it's really having owners that are responsible for it. And we'll talk about, like, what does that look like? Who should be an owner of a particular action or element of your safety strategy? There should also be a rhythm of those check-ins, of understanding, you know, like, how are we tracking to those? And then decisions being made constantly. Do we need to tweak it? Do we need more resources? Do we need more time? Do we need an extension? Do we need to change things up a little, take a different tact, pull someone in from a different area? And then constant feedback going back to not only anyone that's contributing to that health and safety strategy in the first place, but again, those workers at the front line who hopefully the safety strategy is impacting, you know, in a very positive way at the end of the day. If we said we were going to implement, you know, a user-friendly system or put some traffic management processes in place, then is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? So there should be this constant feedback, you know, loop. So the idea is, like, if your strategy is working, I would like for you to have a think about, well, what would leaders be talking about monthly? What would those conversations actually sound like? And then what meetings and forums do you currently have where those conversations would be inserted? The other two questions there around what decisions would be constantly being made in those types of meetings? And then what do you need from the front line? Is it that feedback? Is it that review of a document you've put out to say, actually, those words don't necessarily align with it, so we want this procedure reviewed, or we want the policy updated, or we want pictures inserted? What do you need from the front line to actually keep that grounded in the first place? They would be the things that you would be asking. When we're thinking about who the owner is, or the sponsors initially and then the owner, The idea is I'm used to seeing you bring in a team, you divvy it up. And, you know, sometimes people volunteer. I've seen organizations use Gallup strengths as in, oh, yep, Georgina's really extroverted. She's great at communication. Let's give the marketing promo stuff to Georgina and let's pick someone else to do some of the doing parts, right? At the end of the day, though, it means nothing if you can make a fantastic poster and make it look pretty. What we're looking for is it should be assigned by authority. Do you have the authority to make the change that you're actually wanting to implement? Are you closest to the work area where it has the impact? And then do you have the capability to actually move forward with that? So the idea would be that you actually make the ownership role-based and not the safety team. So usually what I've seen work really well is there's a sponsor, you know, a senior leader or someone who in the health and safety, you know, executive team would say, you know, I'm the person who's, you know, charging forward with this particular element. And they're responsible for removing barriers. You know, we want to get buy-in. I'm going to talk to the ELT to make sure everyone's aware we've developed the new strategy and here's what's in place. That's it. But the owner of a particular element of a health and safety strategy is really the person that's accountable for the outcome. And then the doers are the people who will be executing. So of course that could be the safety team, but the safety team doesn't own the actual element of that. If you're going to impact the front line, then it should be operations who own a particular element of your safety strategy. So we need to think a little bit more differently around, you know, every person in the safety team has a portfolio or a package of work and they are the owners of that work. At the end of the day, the tasks should be small and time-bound or, you know, SMART goals, whatever your organisation currently uses. And I've definitely seen RACI charts put together to really understand what are those threats, what are those risks, you know, like who do we need to get the buy-in and engagement from to help prevent drift and then report on those charts quite often. The idea, though, is that safety is only there to enable and help integrate and assure the process is done. Think of it as if we're a facilitator, as opposed to we are the owner of the process we want to implement, like incident investigations, like changing up our traffic management policy, etc. The people who should own it are those closest to the risk, who have the authority, the proximity, and the capability to be able to go and do those bodies of work. We help create it, shape it, what it looks like, but we want people who are able to do the work and have the authority and proximity to make an impact. Otherwise, what happens, what I've seen is those constant arguments, those refusals, rebuttals, the discussions, the robust ones, the crying in hallways, the doors slamming, the issues of resistance that continuously come across because we are change fatigued. And we've all of a sudden came up with 10 different, you know, elements of a new safety strategy we would like to go implement. And we've not included those really key critical people who are closest to where the work is done in this and allowed them to be the owners of this body of work and to have their say when building the health and safety strategy. So if you're thinking about who should own this particular task element, you know, what it function of your safety strategy, the question should be who is best placed to actually change the conditions that create the traffic management issue, the low incident reporting, the effectiveness of driver zones, those themes that we were talking about. And usually it's not your health and safety partners, not your health and safety advisors, or even your safety manager. It's someone in a work area who has the budget, who has the allocation, the resources to be able to impact. So who is best placed to change the conditions that create those issues that you were all putting in the chat is what we're looking for from an ownership. So when we're thinking about measurements, usually measurements are numbers. I've seen percentages of training, percentages of people put through, you know, whole departments doing this. That's usually what our metrics used to look like on our health and safety strategy. The idea is that we want to flip them to be prompts and not necessarily scorekeeping items. So we want the risk to be made visible and to actually prompt action and learning constantly, not just be something you tick off once you've hit 85. For example, I had one at Coca-Cola where it was like 85% of the entire workforce will be trained up in isolation and lockout. That's not okay. We want to ensure that we are constantly prompting action and learning. Just ticking a box to say you've done 85% doesn't mean they've comprehended it, doesn't mean it's hitting the mark, doesn't mean it's effective. So we need to ensure that we're not just counting for the sake of counting, we're actually putting in some really triggering questions to check off a quality perspective, and you'll see those in a second. And avoid gaming it. I've seen lots of organizations where they'll gamify those metrics. You know, once we hit 50% on a particular project in our safety strategy, the whole safety team goes out for dinner. That helps make it just a number and just a target for us to achieve. So when our measurements need to be triggering some different questions. So what that you've trained 85% of people? So what that you updated your traffic management procedure? What happens once you hit those targets? So I know there's a few of you will have some very interesting metrics. So rather than asking you, I'm going to share some of the common ones that I've seen across the board. So usually health and safety strategies will have some really key components that could be the same across multiple industries, multiple organizations. And these 4 here are ones that I've seen consistently across the board. And that will be audit completion, training completion, injury rates, and actions closed. And usually it's like we want, it has to be a minimum of 90% of our audits across the business or our assurance activities completed. We want 100% compliance to our training management plan or our, training stats. We want our injury rates reduced by 15%, or if you've had a particular trend that got picked up last year, then you'll have hand injuries will need to be reduced, and then you'll have 80% of actions need to be closed within a 24-day window or something like that. The flip side to that is that's great, you completed your audits. But what did those audits find that changes what we actually do next month? Again, what are we impacting from those audits that we all tick the boxes on and highlighted 3 things that were an issue? When it comes to training, like how many percentage or what percentage of people have been trained, where is capability the weakest in practice, and what support do those operational teams actually need to do their jobs? That's where you're going to get more bang for buck rather than just focusing on 95% of our training plan, our training needs analysis is being achieved or whatever that might look like. From an injury rate, I don't need to get into too much about our injury metrics, but where is our serious exposure actually increasing, even if our injury rates look stable? Because what I've seen happen is, we're not having a fluctuation in our incidents, so we're good. That's not necessarily the case. We know that we need to not trust in our green. So the question would be, where is that exposure with our serious stuff actually increasing, even when our metrics in our injury, our TRIFR, our LTIFR are actually staying stable? And then from an actions perspective, which actions actually change conditions? Most organizations do not have an extra lever after you've counted how many actions are closed to go back and talk to the people in those exact situations and scenarios that we thought we were impacting by implementing an action and checking, did we change conditions? Is it helping you or is it hindering you? I've definitely seen a number of instances where actions that the safety team or an investigation has brought out has actually made work harder or even more unsafe for those on the front line to do their job. So what extra levers do we have? What other questions can we ask as opposed to audit completion, training completion, injury rates, and actions closed? Those are pretty key and common ones that you could have a look at. So moving forward, the idea here is to have a think about those themes that you've identified. And the way to kind of see and test it out is to run a little baby experiment. Think about what you can do to create a change on the front line. And the front line, depending on what those little things that you've brought up are, might be the procurement team, might be the person doing the admin work at the back of house, or it literally could be the front line, the person, holding the shovel in your work site, right? But you want to do a micro experiment to see, if I change this up, it's in our health and safety strategy. If I change this up, is it actually going to have an impact on the safety of work? Or am I just having an extra bit of clutter in my health and safety strategy that looks good to the executives because it looks like we're meeting everything we need to address, but it's not doing what it needs to do. It's not creating that impact on the front line, right? once you run that little baby micro experiment, whatever it might be, creating those listening mechanisms, changing up the way that you have those people reporting incidents, creating a new traffic management process, whatever that looks like, having a review. And the review could be a learning team, a focus group, bringing in 3 workers and just saying, hey, you might have noticed we changed these things up with your, help. What do you think? How did it go? What surprised us about, what we did? What didn't work so well? And then actually adjusting the health and safety strategy based on that feedback that you're getting from those frontline workers. What I have seen over the last 18 years is so much emphasis put on having this beautiful, perfect health and safety strategy on a wall, in a document, in an ELT meeting that people can speak to, as opposed to having momentum and tracking change and adaptation on the front line where it really matters the most. And so at the end of the day, what we're looking for is a change in the work as it's being done, not in a change in the work as intended or in our policies or in our procedures or our health and safety strategy. So does anyone have any questions or anything they would like to ask in regards to that information? I will stop sharing my screen. I realized I was talking a little fast towards the end. Does any of it make sense, resonate, land, feel like you've heard it before, not heard it before? Thrown you all for a 6 and now you're like, now I got to go back and review what we said we were going to do. Any comments, concerns, criticisms? Cool. You're welcome, Paul. Nice to see you again, almost, or hear from you anyway. Cool. Okay, so you may find that with soak time, or you go and mention that you watch this really great webinar with Georgina, and you tell someone and they're like, what? So please feel free, if you get asked any curly questions around this stuff, I will send you out the PowerPoint pack now and the recording link. So you'll still have access as well to the chat function for quite some time. So feel free if you do have any questions you want to post. Otherwise, you can come back to me individually. But if you do get any curly questions like, what do you mean we have to involve our operational teams as part of, the building, whatever that looks like, I've pretty much seen or heard most of those curly ones. So I'll send you this PowerPoint pack. Feel free to watch it back. But otherwise, there's no harm in reaching out. Thanks, Paul. If you have any questions regarding, someone gives you a bit of rebuttal around what we've said, happy to give you some information that helps you justify why this information was included and not some of the other stuff that you might have thought was going to be a part of that, if that makes sense. But otherwise, thanks for spending the last 60 minutes with me and listening to my ongoing, very fast talking voice. It's been great. Have a fantastic afternoon. See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.